Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us. We have a few more folks trying to hop on from the waiting room, so they're just trying to get connected. It's really nice to have you join us this afternoon. Well, at least it's this afternoon in Illinois, right? So it's not this afternoon everywhere. So my name is Molly Berry. I work in the Alumni Development Office at Millikin. It is so nice to have you join us for this very first afternoon Blue Table Talk. So I was saying to our panelists that typically we host events like this in the evening, but this is the first one we've done in the afternoon based on time zone differences. And so it's nice to see so many different faces hopping on. So thanks for making your lunch hour, if it is indeed your lunch hour, thanks for making that work with us. So a Blue Table Talk is really a guided, facilitated conversation about a certain topic. And so we have asked some expert panelists, our own alumni, to talk about how they have navigated certain situations abroad in this idea of a global community. And so we want to answer questions and carry on conversation based on what you are interested in. So feel free to ask questions either using the chat feature or just you could raise your hand if you want to be formal, or you could just ask a question and we'd be happy to talk through that process. So if you're unfamiliar with Zoom, and who is unfamiliar with Zoom? Over in the left-hand side of your screen at the bottom, you'll see the mute and the stop video. So it is easiest to kind of stay on mute if you're not talking, to eliminate some background music or noise. And then if you'd like to stop the video, you can, but we love to see your faces as well. If you want to do the chat feature that's in the middle bottom portion of your screen, you can chat with everybody, or you can send a direct message just to a few people. And so I always joke that if you're planning to just send a direct message, make sure it is who you plan to intend to send it to. I have accidentally sent messages to everyone when I meant to send it to one person. So that's funny, as in funny sometimes, right? So just be aware of that. And then, like I said, feel free to ask questions. We are recording this session today because there are a few people that would like to participate in the conversation and can't due to work obligations. So you are being recorded. Okay, so I am happy to turn it over to our panelists. So I want to do a brief introduction and have them introduce themselves. So we have three panelists joining us today who have some expertise and a lot of expertise in being abroad and navigating those cultures. So I have Giovanni with us, Angie with us, and Dr. Diane Bolden-Taylor. So I'm going to have Giovanni introduce himself first, and then we'll go across the top and open for questions.
Okay, thank you so much. It's really nice to be here today, and I'll tell you a little bit about myself and my background and the way I navigate abroad. So I was born and raised here in Italy, and my first international experience was when I went to the States, when I went to Millikin. That was way back in 01, and I stayed in the US between 01 and 04. Time changing experience. I had to adjust to just about everything. Totally different environment, totally different aspects of the way you live your normal life during the day. Different kind of culture. Everything was very different and very exciting. So that was my big major international exposure. Once I graduated, I actually went to London because my mom is British. So I come from an international family. My father is Italian, my mom is British. So I went to London and I was there for about a year. And I worked for the marketing office at the English National Ballet. Then after that, I moved over to Milan. I was there for 4.5 years. And I worked for a number of cultural organizations and theater consortium companies, and also for some fashion companies. So I was there for 4.5 years. And then back in 2010, I joined the family company, which is an international language school based in a small town here in Italy, in central Italy, called Urbania. Mandy's laughing because Mandy has been there. Hi, Mandy.
Hi, Giovanni.
So I joined the family company, and I started to be in charge of the marketing, commercial, sort of business development area. So I oversee that aspect of business. So my job is to really go out abroad in this case, because all of our clients come from abroad. We do a little bit of business domestically, but it's mainly abroad. And so I'm the face of the institution when I go out on the field. And when I recruit, I make new partnerships, I strengthen the existing partnerships that we have. So my job is really, really international, meaning that, as I said, our customers are people coming from all over the world, and they come to Italy for various reasons. So some people are in college. These are what we call the traditional students, but we also have adults. So the most important and the most challenging aspect of this is not only that we go out and we try to sell one product, but because there's so many different countries that we deal with on a daily basis that we have to sort of customize everything that we do for that particular area of the world, of that particular country, because believe it or not, we live in a world that's made up of different worlds, and that is the most challenging aspect, I think, of my job, is to how do you approach when you sell something, a product or a service, or in this case international education, to this side of the world versus this side of the world. And there's so many aspects involved in it. I'm sure we're going to get into more details a little bit later, but yeah, this is what I do and this is what I enjoy. I miss traveling, of course, now that we can't. But of course, I try to do as much as I can, using the technology that we have available. But yes, it's totally different when you're out there, on the field, recruiting and doing things in person, face to face. You learn a lot, and it's a lot more rewarding and challenging. But hopefully, that will happen again soon. So I look forward to the future, basically, and to the end of
Absolutely.
yes, yes.
Giovanni, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Angie. Angie, a little bit about your background when you graduated from Millikin and what you're kind of doing now.
Sure. Yeah, so hi, I'm Angie. I'm very happy to be here today. So thank you for inviting me. I'm from Macomb, Illinois. So Decatur was like a metropolis when I moved there to go to school. And Macomb is about 2.5 hours west of Decatur, where I grew up in the cornfields. And I come from a not very international family, a very American family. Um, and I moved to Decatur in 2001, also like Giovanni. And I thought it was amazing. And I loved my years at Millikin. I was a double major in theater and Spanish. And yeah, I was a JMS student, so I worked throughout my 4 years at Millikin putting together a project that combined both of my loves, theater and Spanish, and first translated things when I was at Millikin. So I translated a play. And discovered my love for language, really, and for helping people and teaching. All of that was from Millikin. So then after Millikin, I moved to New York to go to grad school and did my MFA in dramaturgy, which is a branch of theater, and continued teaching and working in theater, but mostly working with theaters in communities where English was not the first language. So I did a lot of work in theaters in Queens and Brooklyn. And with communities that were sort of sorting out different issues in their neighborhoods, we would come in and create the theater with people who lived in the neighborhoods that were underserved and underappreciated their artistic value. It was really exciting and lots of fun. And I met a lot of people from different countries and different cultures and learned lots of different words in different languages. And I thought that was just, it was awesome. But all of it started at Millikin. And so after that, I moved to Sweden because I met a Swedish guy in New York in grad school. And he was great. And I thought it was very exciting to try a new culture. So we had planned to just move abroad for a year. And now it's 10 years later that I've been living in Sweden. And I usually come back to the US and visit once a year in the summer with my family and visit my parents in Macomb. And so this was the first year, this past year, that I didn't do that, but they come here, we go there. And so now I'm working and living in Sweden, and I'm a translator and an interpreter. I retrained after moving to Sweden. So I had been working in theater for, yeah, all of my life up until that point. And then I become like a language expert in theater and helping with diction, dialect coaching, and that kind of stuff. But there was not so much of a demand for English in Sweden in theater. So I tried to figure out what my other loves were besides theater. And I remembered, oh yes, I've done translation. Maybe I could get good enough at Swedish that I could revisit that. And so 10 years down the line, now I've retrained and I'm an English and Swedish language interpreter. So I work with people in social services, in the court system, the healthcare system, people who have moved here to Sweden, but who have English as one of their mother tongues, who need to communicate with the public authorities and agencies and the police and social services, like I said, a lot of that. So that's what I'm up to now, and I still do some theater related work. There's an English speaking theater here that I work with sometimes. But yeah, working a lot with language and living abroad, living living the dream, I like to say. It's a lot of fun.
Angie, thank you so much. I'm going to introduce Dr. Diane Bolden-Taylor. Dr. Bolden-Taylor, would you like to go next?
Yes. So I hear you guys talking about, oh, I was at Millikin in 2001. I was at Millikin from 1968 to 1972. So long time ago. I'm so glad to meet both Angie and Giovanni, and I will be in touch with you because I need to travel some more when things open up. But yes, I was a music education major. I got my Bachelor of Music Education at Millikin back in 72. I went on from there and got my master's at Indiana University in vocal performance. And I spent the next 17 plus years in Europe, mostly in Germany, but I traveled all over. Now, I've been to Italy many times, but I've never been to Sweden. And so, yeah, I'll have to add that. But yeah, I loved my time at Millikin. So a little background, all right, because I made some notes because there's a lot. I've done a lot since Millikin. Let's see. I spent, like I said, 17 plus years living mostly in Germany. I started out in Switzerland. I lived in Zurich, Switzerland for 2 years. And that's where I got an agent, a manager, an artist manager. And I ended up getting my first, well, I sang at the Zurich Opera House for a couple years. And then I moved to Germany, where I sang in German houses, and my agent got me jobs singing concerts and opera in many places. Let's see, I wrote down a few, like I was in Bonn, in Trier, in Stuttgart, in Berlin, and Hof, in Basel, Zurich. I was in France. I was in Assisi in Italy, one of my favorite places. I've traveled on cruise ships, and I've been the featured singer on cruise ships. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, I sang for many years, performed in Europe for many years. Then I moved back here because one of my friends that I met in Bonn, Germany, when I was singing at the Bonn Opera House. She ended up coming back to United States, and she started working here in Greeley, Colorado at the University of Northern Colorado. And then there was an opening, and she called me and she said, Diane, are you ready to come back home? And I said, well, it depends. She goes, well, there's a job opening here at the university, and I think you'd be a great fit. And I just wanted to know if you were interested. Well, I said, in the meantime, since she and I had met, I had married an American who actually grew up where I grew up in the East St. Louis area. And but he was a military guy in Europe. We met through mutual friends. So I met him. We got married. My daughter was born there, and so I was like, and my husband got transferred back over to had gotten transferred back over to the States, and I was like, I need to be closer to him, and he needs to see our child more than just when he has vacation or when I have vacation. But I had always said to him, we had always agreed that I wanted to come back to the States to a job, to something that I love doing. And so this was perfect. And so I spent 25 years teaching at the University of Northern Colorado. I was chair of the voice department there, and I've been retired for 2 years. I could go on, but I want to leave some time for questions.
It is so great to see like the diversity of experiences of our panelists. And so folks, we have some staged questions, right? So we can continue to talk, but if you have something you want to directly ask, feel free to ask it. So I had someone post in the chat already and said, I'm interested about how other cultures perceive or perceived the United States. So depending on when you served or were abroad, and what differences do you see and did you notice about how people interacted with you if they found out you were from America or had experience in America and things of that nature? So a little bit of a stereotyping question, but also just perception.
Who wants to take that one?
Well, I think the two American gals should talk about that, right? Because I can talk maybe on the other side. So, what was my sort of perception of the United States? So, we receive a lot of footage and image, from the United States via the movies, really. So Hollywood, we see all the shows on Netflix and that kind of stuff. So our idea when we think about the US is that everything is big, everything is exciting, everything is awesome, everything is, really a dream. All right. So that's what we think here. And whenever we think about the states, we always tend to think about the big cities. So New York, Los Angeles, Chicago. We don't really know too much about the rural sort of Midwest or even the mountains, the nature. I mean, we tend to forget about all of that, which is very interesting. So that was really one of the reasons why I actually wanted to do, my studies in a place like Millikin, because I said, well, I'm right in the heart of America, and this is America. New York is a melting pot. It's a beautiful city. I like to visit New York a lot, but it's not what I would call authentic America. And I think you absorb the culture much more when you are in areas such as Decatur, the Midwest, working class families, where life is good, where you actually learn about the traditions and the culture and all the aspects of what really makes America really a great country. So when I was telling this to my friends, they were like, "Oh, so but didn't you want to go to like the big cities? Because everybody's got this idea of skyscrapers and lots of traffic, lots of noise, like Chicago or like New York." So, but I'm actually glad that I was able to stay there. It was the perfect environment, not only to get it, the education, but to really interact with people. Because I think that's a little hard in big cities. It's not just in the US, in general, around the world, people seem to be more stressed out. They don't have a lot of time. They don't have to, too much time to actually sit down and have a conversation and, share with you, what they do and who they are and that kind of stuff. So, but generally speaking, I think we actually think that America is a great country. It's got its ups and downs, of course. It's not the perfect country, but no country is perfect. And I think that's one of the things that everybody should keep in mind when really trying to be international and trying to navigate abroad. It's to be able to recognize that things are different. They're not necessarily better or worse, but they are very different to what we're used to, to our home countries. So it's very interesting that Diane was telling us, and also Angie, about how they had to adjust to a new culture, a new country, a new way of doing things. Well, that was for me when I went to the United States for 4 years, is that you can't assume that because you're used to doing things in a certain way back home, that things are automatically going to be that way where you are. And you have to be very respectful, I think, with the local culture, have to sort of love and embrace everything that it's given to you. But then you can ultimately make the decision whether it's something that you like, or whether it's something that you want to then absorb into your culture. There's a lot of things that I actually do now on a daily basis without realizing that I actually got them from the American culture, which I think is really beautiful. I absorbed it naturally and sort of slowly, which I think is awesome, because I really think that my life was one way before I went to Millikin, before I went to the States. And now I'm really a different person, because it kind of does shape you, in a way. So the culture, the interaction with the people. So all of that was because I went to Millikin. So I didn't know if I answered the question, but yeah, so the perception is actually very good. It's very good. Americans are loved. Americans are loved all over the world.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. And I think I was very worried about how I would be perceived living in Sweden in the beginning, because people are very aware of what you're saying, because you're speaking English, and here everybody learns English in school. So it's children are like, uh, when my husband was growing up, he was born in 78. So he learned English for the first time in fourth grade. But now my children are in first grade and kindergarten, and they're bilingual, but their friends have not yet learned English. But they pick up some words from movies, just like Giovanni said, movies and TV series and everything. So they understand that I'm American, and they are very curious about this. So they will try out little words with me and see how I react. But I remember at the very beginning feeling like, oh, are people going to dislike me? Are people going to think that, that I'm really strange? But I read somewhere that the best accent to have, if you have an accent in Sweden when you're speaking Swedish, is an American accent, because people are so excited to meet Americans or people who have interactions with the US. So that everyone who I've met here has had some kind of trip that they've taken to the US, and they walk me through where they went and what the airport was that they flew into and the sites that they saw. And then so they first tell me about their trip to the US that they took once, and very excited to share this. And then they say, but where do you come from? Do you come from New York, or do you come from Florida, or do you come from California? I say, no, I come from Illinois. And you can see their faces like, where is that?
Uh-huh.
And so then I have to describe, I'm like, okay, well, have you heard of Chicago? Oh, you come from Chicago? No, I don't come from Chicago, but that's close enough if you think on the map. But people are here in Northern Europe very excited about America still, very positive towards the US, and very curious about why those of us who live abroad have left the US. Very curious about, like, but it's amazing there. And my trip was amazing that I took 5 years ago. Why would you ever leave? So that it's always like a conversation point. They're curious, and they want to know, is it really like this? Is it really that, I heard that you have 300 different kinds of cereal available in the grocery store. Is it really cereal made from cookies? Are you serious about this? And it's like, yes, I am. And I'm here to tell you this is real life happening in the US. You can get cereal made out of cookies any day of the week. They're like, oh, so awesome, awesome.
Well, my experience was, in a word, amazing. amazing. I spent 17 plus of the most wonderful years of my life in Europe. I say to many people, I actually became an adult in Europe. I grew up in Europe. Um, it was amazing. I'll give it, I one of my first experiences was arriving in Zurich, and I was going to be a part of the International Opera Studio there. An agent in New York had set me up with the director of the International Opera Studio, and I got there too late in the day to get my hotel room for that night. Back then, if you didn't get there by certain time in the afternoon, everybody went home. You know, the people at the desk, they didn't sit there all evening. It wasn't one of those things where you could get your hotel at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. By the way, you could also not buy groceries after 12 or 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday. They actually, you really can't get stuff on the weekend, but you can now. Back then, you couldn't. So I decided, okay, well, I had taken the train from the airport, and so I thought, well, maybe I'll take the train back to the train station. I had seen a few people laying around in the train station just waiting on whatever, but they were sleeping and just resting or whatever. So I went to this little coffee shop, and I thought, okay, I'll just get something to drink and maybe a pastry or something. So I sat there, and that was all I was ordering. And the waitress kept coming over and filling up my teacup. And she finally looked at me and she goes, everybody wants to use their English. And see, with me, they didn't have to ask if I was American. They assumed that I was American because I'm Black, right? And so they assumed that I was American. And she wanted to try out her English. So she goes, "Oh, are you okay?" And I said, "Oh, I'm fine." She goes, "Well, are you going to, because we're going to close pretty soon. Do you have a place to go?" And I said, "Well, I'm just going to go back to the train station." I was trying out my German as well. I had had 1 semester of German in graduate school, and I was anxious to try out my German. And honestly, you have to almost force Europeans to let you speak their language. They want to speak English, which is helpful, which is great. You know, it's so nice. They want to try out their English. So anyway, she goes, "Oh, you will not go back to the train station. You will come to my house. We have an extra bed. You can sleep there. And then tomorrow morning, you can get your hotel room." She goes, "Oh, under no circumstances will I let you go back to the train station." Those people were my friends forever. And I had no fear. This was in general what happened to me in Europe. Wherever I went, there were people that were always ready to help me. As Angie was saying, everybody wants to know your story. What brought you here? But as soon as I said that it had to do with music, that was the reason that I was there, everybody understood, because there is an opera house in every major city. So lots of people come over to sing opera. So I had amazing experiences. I have people today whom I made friends with just by getting on and off the train, the tram or the trains or whatever. They would start a conversation and they would become your friend for life. But when I say friend, I mean, if you're moving or if you need something, they're there. They're there to help you. It's not just friend lip service, but really, really friend. But yeah, I had experiences like that the whole time I was in Europe. Not that I didn't have some negative experiences, but those negative experiences helped me to grow into the human being that I am now. So I am glad those things happened to me. If we had more time, I would tell you about an experience I had with people in a theater not wanting to put white makeup on me because I was going to be singing this very German operatic role. And that was an experience, but oh my gosh, it ended well and I grew from it. But anyway.
So I want to jump off of that a little bit. So this idea that you all were brave enough and excited enough to seek opportunities internationally. So even Giovanni, coming from Italy originally, but like you even saying, I went to London for a bit because my mom was from Europe or from England. And so that's interesting to me. So my question, to kind of jump off where Dr. Bolden Taylor had started, how did Millikin prepare you in a way that you felt comfortable enough seeking something that was so maybe outside your comfort zone, or something so many of your peers probably wouldn't even try? So what did you gain from Millikin that allowed you to seek some of those opportunities?
Well, I think Millikin prepares you really well to mentally, before everything else, to how to mentally prepare yourself in an environment that it's not so familiar. So you can actually apply that training that you have and then apply it to whatever you want to do outside of your comfort zone. So outside of the box, outside of, whether it's your state, your region, your country. I think that's one of the key aspects that I've learned over at Millikin, how to really discover a culture before perhaps approaching a country, or how do you do business at an international level. So what are the do's and the don'ts? I remember taking this beautiful class. It was international business with Mark Munoz, and he actually spent a great deal of time just talking about how do you approach, a different country. What are all the things that you have to consider? So it was more like training you to think a little bit outside of, your comfort zone, outside of the box, outside of what you actually think that it's going to be, the same as. No, it's not. And how do you go, about all of this? It was really interesting. I think Milliken does a really good job with that, even by sending you maybe to do an internship, in a company that's got international people there. I mean, you're constantly exposed to not only international students who are on campus, but every opportunity is there to kind of challenge you, in a way that then if you like it, then you can actually, make a whole career out of this. There's a lot of study, abroad opportunities in Millikan. So I took a few, and considering that mine was already, a study abroad opportunity, but every single chance I had to do that, I did it because it really does change you. It really does make you realize, okay, this is different. This is something that I've never expected it to be. Milliken, a lot of people come from Illinois or Indiana, or the nearby states, so they're not too familiar with the whole international thing. But Milliken does a really good job in challenging you, exposing you, and trying to send you abroad. And now I hear there's a lot of international students on campus. So again, the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. So it's really also about you, how much you want to, expose yourself, how much you want to challenge yourself. But there's plenty of opportunities for sure. Um, and I remember going to a fair up in Chicago where they were talking about how to do international business, and that was really really interesting. So I took that opportunity. So I'm pretty sure they're still there. And I would actually encourage all the students that are on the call today to really take advantage of these opportunities, because once you're in school, you're free, you've got the time, you've got probably the financial aid, or the opportunity to do these kind of things. And then um, these opportunities are not always there in the future. People start working, they have limited time to go abroad, to explore, to try new things out. So if you have a chance, do it while you're in school, for sure.
For me at Millikin, I have to say that because I had studied Spanish in high school, and I had traveled to Spain before my time at Millikin, just for like a very brief trip, and it opened my eyes, and it was like getting to use language and getting to be in some kind of um, a humble position as an American was incredibly important to me and stuck with me through all of my time at Millikin, that even that it was important to feel like there was so much out there that I didn't know, and that was okay, that was exciting, and that was like, you can't know everything when you're 21 years old. And there were such amazing teachers at Millikin. I remember entering into Millikin and being placed in a 300 level Spanish course my first semester, and feeling like this was wrong. This shouldn't have happened, because then I was going to have to be with juniors and seniors, and I was a freshman. But it was a great course, and it boosted my confidence also. And I feel like that's something that you can't necessarily get at really big schools. This confidence that you can have a like personal connection to your teachers, and feel like they take an interest in you as an individual and you getting better, and especially with language, growing your vocabulary and your confidence, and feeling like, yeah, I can travel to this place and I can communicate with people. And so what if it's not perfect? It doesn't have to be. People will be impressed that you're even trying, especially if you have English as your mother tongue, and you know that you can get by anyway. um, the locals will appreciate it if you are making an effort to try to speak the local language. But I didn't study abroad when I was at Millikin, because I was worried about the theater, missing theater opportunities. So I chose to do an immersion trip, like between the two semesters. So I went to Chile. It was, I think, the second or the first trip that Carmen, the Spanish teacher out of Ada, did to Chile, and got to use my Spanish, and thought that was really, really super fun. Um, but but I think that the thing that Millikan really instilled in me is like that you need to be very humble in order to be a good learner, to understand that you're going to make a lot of mistakes. And that is something, as someone who is coming to another culture and learning everything about that culture now, that I've taken with me every day, that I still make language mistakes here. I still make cultural errors, and I'm still constantly learning new things. And I feel like Millikan allows you to make those mistakes and helps, pick you up after you fall down, and say, that's okay. Everybody does that. And look what you've learned from that, though. So I felt like that was a good experience to have as a young person.
Oh, I totally agree with you. That is exactly what I would say. Those teachers at Millikan back in the day, and I'm seeing that that was the same when you were there in 2001. They took a personal interest in the students. And oh, talk about a confidence builder. That gave you so much confidence. You didn't even think about, well, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. No, your teachers thought you were all of that and more. And so it really helped to build your confidence. I got that from almost every professor that I had. Also in the classes, my music theory, my music history classes, there was nothing that the professors didn't think that you were capable of doing. You, they were always building your confidence. And for me, I had an amazing voice teacher. I had amazing experiences singing on stage in wonderful operas at that little 1,500 folk school. I mean, it was amazing. And I was the regional winner of the Metropolitan Opera auditions while I was at Millikin. So I was like, oh, I can do anything. I can go anywhere. Hey, they told me that I could sing, and then I win this competition. I get to go to the Metropolitan Opera and compete on the stage of the Met. Well, I just knew that I could go anywhere and do anything, and that's why I was not afraid to go to Europe. And you said staying humble. That's another thing. Even though I had these accolades, I learned from people at Millikan, just be thankful.
Mm.
Be thankful. and you will get so many things because people will want to be around you. They will want to help you. I would encourage all students, present students there, take in everything you can. Those 4 years go by so fast.
Mhm.
They go by so fast, and there's a big world out there. And the best education I got was living in Europe. You learn things that you don't even know you didn't know.
Mm.
So it's very, if you can travel, if you can learn a foreign language, try to do it, and try to embrace other cultures.
That's kind of like what Giovanni was saying, Dr. Bolden Taylor, was this idea that I've taken little bits of, my abroad experiences with me. So it's like this opportunity to continue to like absorb and like start to live in a way that you don't even realize you're doing it, right? So I've taken this from this place, I've taken that from this place, right? So you just start to build. Folks, do you have questions from the floor? Can our panelists answer anything that you're interested in asking?
I have a question.
Brianna, tell people what your role is. I was gonna introduce you when you hopped on and I forgot to.
Okay, so my name is Brianna Stevens Quintens. I'm the director at the Center for International Education, and I also am in charge of the English language programs at Millikin. So yeah, I do the incoming international students and outbound study abroad. And thank you guys so much for doing this talk. It's been really enlightening, and I can't wait to get the recording of it so that I can send it out to all the students who are thinking about studying abroad or even apprehensive about studying abroad, because being in a little, school with people who are often unfamiliar with travel, it can be hard to get them to see the big picture, really. And so that's kind of my question for you guys, is for students who are thinking, I know we have some students on the call today that are thinking about really living abroad and not just visiting short term, but wanting to make a life out of it. What steps do they need to take to start planning that, in your opinion?
Great question.
I would say that I moved abroad with no job a month after I got married in the US, and it was quite hard. I'm not sure I would do that again. But that was just what happened. Also, I quit all of my jobs. I had various freelance jobs in the US with theater companies. And I was also teaching as an adjunct at different universities. And there was nothing that, like, it just didn't make sense for me to try to find work before moving and learning some of the language. I felt like for me personally that was important. I wanted to, I was ready for a new adventure. And I, when you're ready for a new adventure, you don't always think like long term. So for me, it was like, okay, I had some savings. I had saved up, and I had my husband who knew the language and had his parents here. So at the beginning, it was like very low expectations, having expectations of like getting an ID card, making sure that I had some sort of like social security card number equivalent, um, those kinds of things, like figuring out what I needed to register, where I needed to go at the beginning to get all of the paperwork. So I felt like the practical things were underway, getting a bank account, a new cell phone so that I could have a number that could be contacted. But then I have to say that right at the beginning, I signed up for language classes and met other people who were foreigners here. And that was so important. And I'm still friends with a lot of them today from other countries who were going through the same experience, no matter how old or how young they were, of what is that name of that store where you can get, coffee. Oh, okay, it's called this. Oh, is that how that's pronounced? Like, so creating these kinds of like going through it with another person, even so I couldn't really do that with my husband because he is Swedish. It was important to have that confirmation from other immigrants who were also having similar struggles and similar successes. Also, you'd have these breakthrough moments of, oh, I figured this out, I knew how to do this, and or those kinds of things. But I would say that for me, I know a lot of people, and I think Dr. Bolden Taylor mentioned this, that it was important for her to have work before moving back to the US, to have something to go back to that was more concrete. And I think that probably would have been a better plan for me if I could have chosen that this way coming to Europe. But it worked out fine anyway. You find your way. If you want to make it work, you will make it work. So now I'm back to freelancing. I have my own company. So it's not so super far from what I was doing when I was living in New York. It's just a different field. But, if you want to have that kind of life, you will make it work eventually.
I think, Angel, what you just said makes perfect sense. But I think, you were kind of lucky that you had, someone, like your husband to do this together. He's the one who brought you into the country. I think if someone doesn't have any kind of connections into a specific place, I would probably advise students or people who, whoever, to do a lot of research first. Although what you think is going to make sense on paper, once you go to the place, it does not. And I think Angie and Diane can relate really well with what I'm trying to say. Like, you think you've got it all figured out, you have your plan, you know exactly how to do things and where to go. Once you get there, it's, your plan just gets messed up because the reality, once you're on the field, is very different. What I would do is to contact the either local embassy or the local consulate of that particular country. So either in Chicago or in DC or in New York, and talk to them and ask them questions. Even what you think might be a stupid question, it is not a stupid question, when you're talking internationally. So is it appropriate if once I get there, how do I go about finding a place to live? How much is the average rent? I mean, we're talking basic questions that normally one would not even think about when you're dealing with stuff that it's local, that it's domestic. But once you start doing things, and I do it myself all the time, when I approach a new country, I have to do the research. I have to do the homework at home even before going over there. And then I'm always surprised about all kinds of unexpected things that come up. So if you're really planning a big move, and if this is, sort of a life-changing thing that you've got in mind, I think you have to prepare yourself as much as you can. And also, as Andrew was saying, be prepared for the unexpected, because there's going to be so many things along the way that you thought were going to work one way, but then they're not working that way. Have a little bit of savings. I think that's very smart, especially during these times. And just be mentally prepared for the unexpected, and also to fail. It's okay to fail internationally. I don't think there's anything wrong about it, but at least you were able to get it out of your system and say, you know what, I tried, it didn't work out. I personally hated living in London. My mom is British, she's from London, but somehow I did not click with that particular environment. And it was very strange for me because I thought I was going to live there for the rest of my life. After Millikin, I said, you know what, the UK, I'm closer to home. It's an Anglo-Saxon, culture. I'll go there, and I hated it. So if one country doesn't work, it doesn't mean that you cannot then try something different. But it's tough. And Angie, I think, did the right thing. She surrounded herself with other people that she could share the weight. Sometimes it can be very lonely. You feel like you're not getting it. Nobody's there to help you. Everything is complicated. She was saying about applying for, your residence permit or a social security, things that you automatically do in the United States. Go to the post office, da 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 da. In 5 minutes, it's done. it can take up to a whole week. You move from one office to the other one, you don't know what you're doing, you feel like you're stupid. Everything is very complicated because when you go and study abroad, programs, well, the professor is there, he takes you on the flight, the hotel is arranged. The real thing is very different. So don't get discouraged, but do try to find like a little family. So create a little circle of people that will support you. So whether it's friends, whether it's an agent, Diane was telling us about the agent that was there helping her getting the first contract. Surround yourself with little guardian angels that can really make a difference, because there's going to be days and times when you are just going to be so full of it that you're just going to say, this is too much, I can't cope with this, I want to go back home. But obviously if you have people supporting you, that might be a big difference, I think. I mean, we can talk about this for hours, but I was just saying, so the point of my speech here is, do as much preparation as you can, but be prepared for the unexpected, because there's going to be a lot of bumps around, along the road. But if you really like the place and if you really think that that's where you belong, then you should not give up so easily and really try to fulfill your dream and make it work.
No, I would totally agree with you, Giovanni. That I can't imagine having gone to Zurich and not having the International Opera Studio there, because immediately when we met, I had all these other friends who were also Americans, and I had, you form these bonds, and everybody helps each other. And I really can't imagine having gone there and not having some sort of contacts. So I'm not saying you shouldn't be brave and just, try it, but I think if you have just one contact, one person that you could be in contact with, I think it makes a big difference, because you don't know what it's going to be like. There's no way you can imagine what it's going to be like until you're in that country. The unknown is the unknown. And I've always been someone that is like, okay, bring it on. I'm ready. And I think that's a great attitude to have, but it's helpful if you have somebody who's an advocate for you.
I have to say that at the beginning also, I looked for different Facebook groups, especially English-speaking groups. But I didn't narrow it down to just Americans, because I felt like I didn't jive with all other Americans abroad. There were some people who I didn't get along with, and it was maybe because we were American. We were so close to the US. So I started like branching out right at the beginning. And now I have like friends from various countries, but I also have a really close group of Americans here that I met, and like, okay, we actually get along. It's not just because we're American, it's also because we have these things in common, and these things that we can joke about the US, and some things that like we both dislike about Sweden, so it was like, just because you're from the same culture also doesn't necessarily mean that you can be best friends and just share being American. But I would say that like those meetup groups and Facebook groups where you like, okay, do you want to go surfing today, or do you want to go and try this like new kind of dessert at this place in town? You don't really have to like, it's kind of like dating but with friends. And that was also very important at the beginning, is like groups of people going to a brewery together or something like that. No pressure, you don't ever have to see each other again, but like it was nice to have something to do with other people.
Well, folks, we have 5 minutes left. So I'd love to take another question from the floor if you have it. If anyone has a final question, we'd love to answer that. If not, I have a closer, so no pressure.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Barbara.
My name is Barb. Without getting into politics, the two of you who are currently in a foreign country, did the view, although you've sort of touched on it, has the view of those Europeans changed with how they feel about America now that the insurrection of the Capitol building has happened?
Great question, Barb.
I work in a political science department, so full disclosure, I'm a university administrator part-time, but we're all working from home right now, so it's difficult to get a real feel for this. But yes, I would say that people are bewildered here, and
All of us
the
are.
and the U.S. news is very, very covered in Swedish media. It's a major ally to Sweden, and yeah, so people are confused and bewildered, I would say, but hopeful.
Well, folks, I think to kind of like wrap it up for us, if you could just share maybe like maybe one thing that you've learned about yourself through your global experiences, just like short and brief, but what's one thing that you've kind of taken away and thought, wow, I would not have gained this if I hadn't traveled abroad or been exposed abroad?
I'll start. I'll make it brief. I know that I learned that I could go anywhere and do anything. It's such a confidence builder when you live in a foreign country and you learn a foreign language and you're able to communicate with people in their language. First of all, they love you more because you try to speak their language. You haven't come there as what they used to call us, the ugly American, and assume, oh, well, I don't need to know your language. You need to figure out mine. But it's a wonderful confidence builder. And let me tell you, when I came back here and started teaching at the University of Northern Colorado, my students couldn't wait to hear my stories. And they were just, I made so many of them excited about the possibility of traveling out of our country so that they could learn something about other cultures. So I brought that with me and I passed it on to my students, many, many students over the last 25 years.
I would say that the main thing that I have learned is that you can have a plan for your life, and I had a very concrete plan leaving Millikin. It doesn't matter if your plan doesn't work out for whatever reason, because you meet the love of your life and he happens to be Swedish. I couldn't have known that at Millikin, and I was all ready to go live abroad in some Spanish-speaking country after working so hard on Spanish for many years. I don't think I could have even found Sweden on the map, frankly. And it's okay. You know, you somehow like, you are who you are, and you find like that kernel of whatever it is that you're really passionate about. It will find a way out eventually, even if it's not exactly what your plan for that kernel was in the beginning. I think it's okay, and it doesn't mean that it's a failure. It just means that like it's an adventure, and it's something that that I've learned about myself in the past decade, especially living abroad, is that like I can still be Angie even if it's not exactly what I thought I would be doing.
Mhm.
For me, I think it's so the more I discover new cultures, the more I want to discover more. Does that make sense? So so the more you travel, the more you want to be on the road, and the minute you come home, it's like, okay, let me get another flight. I need to go somewhere else. It becomes a kind of a drug. Once you hit the road, you always kind of want to be on the road, because it's exciting, it's challenging, and then you come home and you start hearing the news and you go, okay, so I think the world, it's not as big as we think it is. The more you travel, the more you realize that we're all in, for the same goals. We all want to live peacefully and have a good time and have a good life. but the way we go about it, it's a little bit different. And the way we do things on a daily basis is very different, which to me is very fascinating. I always say we all sleep sort of 8 hours a day, the lucky ones at least. And we all have to do, 3 meals a day at least. But then everything else in between, for the amount of time that we spend sleeping and eating, it's so different. And the way we go about it, it's so interesting. So I kind of want to explore more. So from Asia to the US to Europe, there's all kinds of, aspects of it, which I think is really fascinating. So culture, I would say. I'm learning a lot of culture, which is wonderful. And it's also making you understand, I think, a lot more when people talk about, geopolitical issues and problems. And Barb, you were just talking about the capital. It does have an impact on you. If you know the culture, and if there's some big news associated with that particular country, I think that day I was grieving even more because of the love and passion that I have, for the US. And, it almost feels like it's a second home and that kind of stuff. So you get really passionate about it and you understand things a little bit differently.
Well, my great thanks to Dr. Bolden Taylor, Angie, and Giovanni for spending their evenings and afternoons with us today. So thank you so much for time. So thanks, folks. Thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Have a great afternoon. See you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Diane.
Oh, Carol!
Oh, wonderful to see you again. Diane and I were
Yes.
classmates at
Yes.
Millikin. Yeah,
Yeah. We'll have to be in touch soon.
definitely. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you. See you guys later. Bye.
See you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.